the fact remains this, is that when you look at in corporate America, you either drive culture or culture organically happens and it's done to you.
Yes.
And so for me, I'm like, look, let's sit down with leadership and the ownership and figure out what kind of culture do you want to have here? And then we start to build teams through that, and we build processes through that. You can hire to that type of thing too if you're sophisticated enough with it, which is why I use behavioral assessments, because I want to see how people are hardwired.
Yeah.
You know, when you're in an interview with someone, that's the best version of themselves.
Welcome to Corporate Caffeine. On today's episode, Kyle and I talked to Tim Ferry, the CEO of Sandler Training in Fort Worth and an executive coach. Now, Tim got a job before he was legally able to, and when he was busted because of lying about his age, he decided to go into business for himself, and he never looked back. He sold the company that he started as a teenager and just kept rinsing and repeating that formula. Now, he is a master sales trainer. And there is a lot of psychology behind what he does and why he's so good at helping other people be successful. Let's jump right in because you are going to love this conversation. Tim Ferry, we are so excited to have you on Corporate Caffeine. Welcome to our humble abode.
Thank you. This is not just a humble abode. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
Well
we got lucky on it. And nice to finally meet you. I've heard a lot about you for a long time now, and I'm like, who is this Tim Ferry? Who is this guy? So
who is this nut?
Yeah, I've heard a little bit of that about that too.
Oh yeah,
a little crazy.
Oh yeah, I can't take you can't take life too seriously ever.
Nah,
life is too short. I think when you look at the world today, where we spend so much time looking for different ways to be outraged, and for me, I just look for different ways to be thankful and for areas where I find massive humor.
So now are you always like that? Because of course, like I know you behind the scenes, right? Like CEO to CEO and cracking jokes and making light of difficult things and just adding some levity to sometimes serious situations. So, but are you that guy on the client side and on like the day-to-day operation side?
It's a good question. I tend to be very professional with my clients. Until it's appropriate to be obnoxious and sarcastic. And when they understand the context behind what I'm saying, I think I would never do that with someone new because, again, they don't know where my heart is. So if I say something off, just a little bit sarcastic or use some wicked humor in there somewhere, I don't want anybody to be off-put.
Yeah.
And so I'll tend to be very chill in the beginning, understand what type of temperament the person I'm communicating with has, what their primary and their secondary disc profiles, for example, would be. And then I'll mirror and match that appropriately. And as time goes by, not even during one conversation, but several conversations, then I'll know where and when I can kind of throw a zinger in there or be a little goofy. So
yeah, that's awesome.
I think when I do, when I'm doing trainings and the like, you've got to be able to mix in, stories and have relevant experiences that you can share, because otherwise you're just vomiting content on someone, which is horrifically boring.
Yeah.
Does that answer the question?
It totally does. And I mean, I kind of get it. Kyle knows this about me better than, probably anybody, but I will ramp up whatever goofy, quirky, charisma or something on stage. Like it's the biggest when I'm in training in stage environments or workshops. And then one-to-one, I'm probably my most serious because I'm about, excuse my language, but getting shit done. You know what I mean?
Sure,
like when we're like in meeting environments or when I'm running a client meeting or something, it's not like we might laugh or smile, but I'm kind of like, hey, we got 45 minutes and I'm going to respect this, but we're going to get some stuff done here.
Right.
And then, and then there's just the wide range, like while the other, like areas of your personality that you kind of push and pull, depending on appropriateness. But I've always only seen you, like you have a lot of seriousness, but you are always funny. So that's why I was like, do you do that all the time?
Yeah, I like how you worded the intro when you're like, I like to bring humor in a world that's, negative right now. And you always hear people talk about, oh, the world's so chaotic right now. It's never been this bad. Well, I don't agree that it's bad.
Agreed.
Like history, or if you pull up data, it's not bad right now. We're the best we've ever been as far as poverty levels, all these type of things.
For sure.
It's the negativity that's perceived in people and that's transparent in social media and this, that, and the other, where you're like, well, we're just hearing the negative side of this person.
Right.
They don't highlight the positives a lot of times.
Yeah. And Kyle, to your point, Steven Pinker wrote a book called Angels of Our Better Nature, or something like that. And it's about a gigantic book. It's about 700 pages long. And what he does is he goes back through the history of time, and he literally proves out that right now is the safest time in human history that there ever was to not die by violence.
Yeah.
Maybe I've heard him in a podcast. That name rings a bell. I know I haven't read the book, especially when it's 700 pages. Maybe an Audible if I've got long enough. But maybe I've listened to him in a podcast, and he was describing statistically why we are in a good time right now. I bet you it was him.
Yeah.
It's interesting.
That's so cool.
Very interesting.
Well, I mean, I also think like it doesn't do us any good. It doesn't serve us individually or collectively to say things are terrible, like the world's gone to hell in a handbasket, everything is bad. Because what kind of self-fulfilling prophecy are you creating there?
Right.
I mean, like, how does that serve anyone, including your own, goals? But if you're like, wow, safest, most prosperous time in history, look at all this opportunity. And if we can trust the whole history of humanity, that means it's going to keep going in that direction.
Right.
And that we are resilient and things are abundant. That's a great point of view. And that's something that should instill confidence in ourselves and culture in general, that we're moving forward. Like, that's awesome.
Yeah.
So.
Even in the 20th century, if you look at, there were about 130 million murders due to World War II, like 20 million. Everybody knows there were 6 million Jews that were killed by the Nazis. The Nazis also killed 20 million Russians. There were 8 million Germans that were killed. There were 400,000 Americans that were killed. When you add that up, and Pol Pot killing 3 million Cambodians, and the Chinese Communist Party killing 20 million with the
Genghis Khan.
For sure. But when you just in the 20th century, if you really look at the numbers, we ended the 20th century with roughly 6.5 billion people. And if you add up all of the people that started from 1901 to the year 2000, and then you take that 130 million deaths in there, it's not very likely at all, even in the middle of the 20th century when all of this bad stuff was happening, that you were going to die due to violence. Statistically speaking, it was so small in this time when we saw it all on video cameras. It's not like it's the first time it ever happened. Like, bad stuff has happened throughout all of human history. Yeah. It just was recorded on video. And so that's, again, perspective. And I think the problem is most people don't have the advantage of being able to look historically back and zoom out and look at like where we really are. They just think that right this second is the worst that it's ever been, when in reality, I used to tell this, I almost got kicked out of teaching high school kids in Sunday school, because I asked them the first day I did this was 20 years ago. I said, everybody raise your hand if your parents have told you it's never been worse than it is right now. And they all raised their hand. And I go, what if I told you there's more sex, drugs, and rock and roll in the Old Testament than there has ever been? And they were like, what? I'm like, the only difference between like the year 3000 BC or when Moses was roaming around and today is we have video cameras. That's the only difference.
Everyone knows it.
Yeah, and everyone knows it.
Yes.
Right. Like, so that's kind of the perspective that I have. And the church didn't like that one, by the way. Like, you can't say that. I'm like, but is it true?
Yeah. And you're talking to teenagers. Like, come on, I'm trying to relate here.
Oh, they went crazy. They'd show up at 9 o'clock on a Sunday morning. They'd be like, I want to hear what that dude says.
Yeah, it's different.
It was way different.
Yeah.
Well, like back to that perspective thing, like something I've kind of been like jamming on in my head recently is the power of emotion in life and in business as like a force, like that propels things, and not always forward, but in whatever direction that it,
Yes.
that motion is taking you in, like a rudder to a boat. So like, for instance, like if you're saying all of these negative things and you're believing them and you're just absorbing yourself, or like letting things absorb into you that create a perception of truth, that is the emotion that starts to propel you in whatever direction, and I mean, it can be slower and heavier and harder, but with that positive side, I mean, as silly as if I'm feeling uber confident, right? Like decide to wear like my huge stilettos that make me 7 inches taller than I should be.
I'm going to stop you right there. That'd be like every day then? That you're that confident?
There is a reason that I do that. Because it's like, when you
had
do,
COVID,
I'm kind of like, watch me. Like, let's go. Like, you know what I mean? But that emotion of like what I believe is possible.
2 days you had
What are you about to
COVID that
say?
you were down and out and you had flip flops on or something.
Back to 5'3".
Yeah. On a good day. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Kicking it in the face.
Oh, I love that.
But I mean, like that, but I think people feel like they are slaves to their emotions, but you can use it as an engine on purpose and do things and make choices about what you believe and what you decide to be a part of that then push you towards success or pull you away from it, and I don't think there's like enough voice given to like what it does to people on the inside and the individual impact it has when they believe false narratives that are dangerous to their psyche.
Yeah, I think it's even, I want to build on top of that because there's a concept that I learned a long time ago through actually my Sandler training, and it's called IR theory, and it's identity versus role. And the concept with identity versus role is roles are what you do. So Kyle, you're a husband, you're a business owner, you're a dad, you're a friend, you're a son. When you're in your car, you're a driver. There's a million different roles. And if you look at all of those roles in any given moment, you can grade yourself on a 0 to 10 scale. 10 is high, 0 is low. And within a single conversation, you could be in 1 second, you could be an 8 as a dad, but then you tell your kid, no, they can't have the car for the weekend. And you may feel like you're a 2 in a nanosecond. The idea of identity is that your identity is who you are stripped of all your roles. And the problem that I see today is that 2 things. One, we tend to have, we've tied our roles to our identity. And so that means you're going up and down with whatever it is. So I'll give you an example. Brett Favre, one of the greatest quarterbacks in NFL history, destroyer of the Chicago Bears, much to my chagrin.
And you're from Chicago.
And I'm from Chicago originally.
So to admit that, I like you already.
Yeah.
I'm just joking.
Kyle, I have suffered as a Chicago Bears fan.
I have a buddy from Chicago, not to cut you off, but
No, go ahead.
And he says his dad told him when he was young, they're going to let you down. This was after Peyton, Walter Payton. And they go, this town right here, they're going to let you down. And this was before they win the World Series, even the Cubs did.
Yep.
He goes, every one of these sporting, it's
everyone.
Anxiety.
Everyone.
Yeah.
But, you think of like Brett Favre. He was had an amazing career as the Packers murdered the Bears every time they played them. And he decided he was going to retire. And so he gave the NFL notice and they put him on national TV a half dozen times. Every stadium that he went to, whether it was in Lambeau Field or, even the New York Jets, they would sell out because they want to see Brett Favre play his last game against their team. And he retired exactly for 3 months. And then he went and played for the Jets for a couple years. And then he retired again, and he retired for 3 months. And he went to play for the Minnesota Vikings until basically the NFL just beat him to a pulp and he couldn't do it anymore. And the reason is he couldn't imagine his life outside of being an NFL quarterback.
Yeah.
His identity and who he was tied up into that. So what I see today is again, you've got to anchor your identity into something that doesn't move. So for me, it's my faith. I know that no matter how stupid I am in a role, my faith I wake up in the morning and I go, I'm a 10 in my identity. And so no matter what noise is going on in the roles that I have, my identity is protected. And the funny part is that you can only operate in any given role that's consistent with how you score yourself in your identity. So if you're beaten to a pulp and you've tied your identity to, something that moves all the time, like your emotions, like, you look at society today,
right.
we've killed God and eliminated God.
Yep.
And so now it's about, everything's about how you feel.
Yep.
So now everybody runs around and they have their identity anchored to nothing. And then they run around saying, oh, well, this is how I feel. And this is why I think you can't have an actual discourse with anybody who has different belief systems or ideas than you. Does that make sense?
Oh my gosh.
It totally does.
That is huge. Yeah. I mean, I'm definitely going to be doing some journaling and thinking on that because it's so important. And it goes back to, because if you can be anchored to that, then you can pull yourself back to, what do I know to be true? Unalterable about me, about life, about God, about the people that I love. And you can find forgiveness for yourself, for other people. But I mean, all of a sudden you have a lot of power there because you are not at the mercy of everything buffeting you here, there, and everywhere. So, I mean, I think that's, really, really amazing.
It's removing everyone's personal opinion about you.
Yeah.
Because you're going to take that to heart unless you can ground your foundation to something that's outside of that. And what would that be? There's not many things out there that a person can ground themselves to.
Well, it's interesting you say that, Kyle, because it doesn't necessarily have to be your faith. It could be something else that's immovable. Like you can say, I want to live a life of integrity. I'm going to tie my identity to integrity or honesty or being genuine and authentic. And those are also things that now, again, if you have your identity tied into that, you can compare all of your different roles and all of the noise of the world, and you can go, well, but I'm still going to live a life of this. And so you kind of insulate yourself away from the opinions, the social media opinions of the mob of stupidity that comes in and says, and they start yapping at you like a chihuahua. You're kind of like, I'm going to quack like a duck. It's going to roll right off my back. Nothing's going to bother me.
Okay, so the application of this, because you had mentioned that this is part of Sandler and part of your day-to-day work. Huh? Okay, so how do you apply that in sales training and executive coaching? Like what? Because while that is profound to me as an individual and super interesting conversation, and me and my journal later, what does that have to do with sales? And you know what I mean? And like how people show up every single day.
Kind of explain
in
what
their
you do
business
to
life.
everyone too before that. We kind of looked right over.
Well, I figured we would get into it. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. No, that's fair. So I own a Sandler sales and training performance company here in Fort Worth. And what I basically do is I'm working with CEOs, presidents, and business owners who are struggling in some areas of their business, and they want to improve them in regards to hunting for new sales. Sometimes their salespeople are dropping price in order to get new business. Maybe the sales pipeline isn't deep enough and consistently bleeding new business. And so they'll come to me and they'll be like, can you do anything about that? And the question is maybe. And it depends on what I'm working with. If you give me a bunch of, people that just literally came out of the space-time continuum and showed up, maybe not. And so the very first thing I would do is assess them, issue behavioral assessments to figure out how they're hardwired in terms of 29 different behaviors and if they have the motor for it, if they have the capacity for it. And then the sales training that I do, it's very much psychology based. And so that's essentially what I do. Lots of business consulting, lots of behavioral assessments, lots of executive coaching. I think strategically quite well. I'm pretty agile in that side. And I'm extremely well read. So I've read about 11,000 books in my lifetime. That's literally the number.
Wow.
Do you read them all, or do you?
I read them all. I read everyone.
Really?
Yeah.
That's
Absolutely.
amazing.
It's spooky. And I remember it too because I learn differently than most people. So most people will have a preferred way of learning. They'll either see it, they'll hear it, or they'll have to touch it and feel it.
Yeah.
So they call it visual, auditory, or kinesthetic.
Right.
I'm actually all three. If it's going to stick into my skull, I need to see it, say it, and then write it down. And so that's what I do when I'm reading books. I'll be like, oh, that's an interesting thing. I'll write it down. I'll say it, after I read it. And that's how it cements in my skull. So that's why I remember things.
That's
so how many
amazing.
journals do you have?
Yeah.
2. Only 2. One's a gratitude journal.
Okay.
And there's an app on, you can get either through iTunes or through Samsung, and it's called Penzu, Penzu. And it's a free app, doesn't cost you anything. And every day before my feet touch the ground in the morning, the very first thing that I do is I type out with my thumbs laying on my back, mostly in the dark, what I'm grateful for. And then I type out 3 business goals that I'm going to accomplish that day and 2 personal goals that I'm going to accomplish that day.
Every day.
Every single day. I've done this for the last 7 years. I've done this.
Before your feet hit the ground.
I'll be back in an hour. Oh, you're killing me. I used to write down, what I was going to do every day, and I'd map it out the day before, and then double check it in the morning, physically as well. I'd write down what time I'm working out, what I'm going to do. Lately, it's been out the window with everything we've had going on,
year.
But I know it's coming right back, probably a week or 2. I'm going to be back in it. But I was just wondering, as much as you read and the way you learn, I was like, I bet this guy writes a ton of journals, but you don't really, you just keep simplicity.
Yeah. For sure. And
to get things.
The one thing that I think you can maybe call journaling. So for my 3 kids, I've got 3 kids, 21, 18, and then 18, almost 18. And since they were born, the day they were born, I hand wrote a letter to them, physically on notebook paper. And I just documented what's going on in the world today. I would get like a Chicago Tribune and a Chicago Sun-Times paper on there the day they were born. And then I started writing these letters out. Here's what's going on in the world. Here's what I think about being a new dad. And here's here's what I first thought the second I saw you. And I sealed it up and put it in an envelope, numbered it, dated it. Never to be opened until the day I croak when my kids, and I do this 4 times a year. I do it each quarter.
Whoa.
I do it every quarter. So now like my 21-year-old has, over 80, he's got 82 letters written, and it's documented his entire life. So that's the only real journal. Like that's a diary.
That's huge.
Wow.
But it's once a quarter.
It will be huge for them one day.
Yeah.
To know what you're thinking about them and the perception you have of what's going on in the world, they're going to be able to absorb so much out of that rather than just memory. It's documenting in real time without video.
Yeah. And it also gives me the perspective of what's going through my head at the time. Like everybody says, oh, the terrible 2s are awful. Well, for my oldest kid, it was the freaking 4s that were the ones that I'm like, this is why lions eat their young.
Yeah.
I just hated the evens. 2 was terrible, 4 was terrible, and 6 was terrible. After that, they're a different age. But the evens were terrible.
The evens. That's half of it.
But that's how so I don't do a lot of journaling other than that. I don't. I write a lot. I do blog posts all the time.
Yeah.
But that's different than journaling.
Yeah.
For me, journaling is it's functional. It's not necessarily strategic. It helps me stay focused on what I have to accomplish. It makes sure that it ensures that I stay balanced in my work and in my life. Mm-hmm. And that's what I think I did wrong in my first marriage, is that I was all work and no life. And that's how I destroyed the marriage. I'll own that piece.
Yeah.
And I don't say that proudly. I mean, that's something that was maybe one of the biggest learning opportunities of my life, was absolutely destroying that relationship, because I was like, well, but if I only stay focused on these things, by the time I'm 40, I'll have, $4 million, and then I can put it on cruise control.
Yeah.
you talk and hear a lot of guys who have that drive, well, women as well in the business world, that have that mentality of, I'll go get it. Once I get it, it'll be fine. And when they look in the rearview mirror, everything's gone.
Yeah.
They're like, whoa, what did I just miss?
You're estranged from your kids.
Gone. Yeah.
Yep.
There's a price to pay for it. Balance is crucial for sure. Almost got wrapped up into that. Then we called it quits, sold everything at one point in our lives.
I think that's a good, that's a good self-awareness on your part, again, because you averted the disaster that I wrote and tons of people walk into.
Yeah.
Because I had goals once from the time I was 14 years old. I started my first company and I knew exactly what I wanted. I wanted a house in Vail. I wanted a house in London. I wanted a house in next to the Biltmore estate in North Carolina. I wanted lots of things. I wanted fast cars, Ferraris, and I wanted a jet. I wanted to fly private everywhere. And that's what I was solely and utterly focused on. God was nowhere near it, his hand was everywhere, but I was like Odie just running around like a dope. Yeah. And that's what it cost. And it was terrible. And so, the second time around, I made sure that that's
the balance.
The balance is there by a lot. Like I've readjusted everything. So it's a good way to be.
It's a hard pivot, but now, it's funny because anytime, like when we catch up, you are immediately like, the German's doing amazing. By the way, he calls his wife the German. My kids are incredible. Life is good. And it's interesting, like hearing you say the very first thing you do is write out gratitude, because I'm like, literally the very first words out of your mouth anytime there's a reconnect is gratitude. So I'm like, oh my gosh, like there it is. Like that's amazing.
Yeah, the genesis behind the German, by the way. So my wife's name is Angela. She actually has a name.
What?
I call her Angie. The kids call her the German. But she's a German farm girl. Grew up in central Minnesota, 100% purebred German for like 10 generations. And she's, when you drive BMWs, they say, ooh, it's the ultimate driving machine, right? And it's precision everything, precision engineering. And that's, my wife, she's precision engineering in every way, shape, and form.
That's awesome.
And so how I built her up is I built her up to celebrate the fact that she's strong and beautiful and powerful and smart. And she's unbelievably organized in all of the things that I could never be organized in, because I'm like a ping pong ball. I'm all over the place, squirrel, constantly.
Does not sound like it. Not going to lie.
Yeah. I was like, wait a minute. Aren't you used to this? Hold on.
Yeah. So
I get where you're coming from, by the way. Yeah.
So that's the genesis of where the German came from. It's, I actually said this out loud and somebody yelled at me. I said, my wife is like, I call her my little Panzer tank. And they were like, and she was this woman was so triggered by this. Like, you can't call your wife a tank. I'm like, do you have any idea what a Panzer tank was? Like, it was the baddest ass thing that there ever was in World War II. You needed like 3 Sherman tanks, American Sherman tanks, to take out one of these things. Yeah. It was indestructible in so many different ways. It was one of the fiercest things, other than the T-72 Soviet tank. It was one of the most fierce things on the battlefield. And of course, that's what I would call my wife. But after a second, I was like, oh, maybe a girl doesn't want to be called a tank.
Got it.
Maybe she doesn't. So I stopped calling her my Panzer tank. But
is she was she born and raised in Minnesota? Or she came? Okay.
Yep.
So she's German, but she doesn't live the life of.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
So I over the last 3 years my son is fluent in German and Spanish, and he's the one who just graduated college. And so my goal 3 years ago was, instead of giving him money or, saying, hey, attaboy, congratulations. My goal was I was going to take him to Germany for a month, and I was going to speak only fluent German with him as we toured all over Germany. So for the last 3 years, I've been working on an app called Duolingo. And so I think my vocabulary now is about 4,000 German words. I can get around.
You can get around for sure.
Like I can watch German. I can watch Dark, which is on Netflix, and it's in German. And I don't even need to like have German subtitles anymore.
Wow.
I could just watch them and listen, and
Really?
I can
Wow.
follow along with it.
She had she's practiced German in college.
Ein bisschen.
Ein bisschen. A little.
Yeah.
Das ist gut. Das ist gut.
That is all.
Yeah.
9 more.
It's amazing.
Oh, I got a funny
I
story.
got it through Germany back
We
then.
were
Couldn't
together.
know.
We were together dating at the time
Oh,
for the
you are not gonna say
'96
this.
Olympics that were in Atlanta. We
Yeah.
both lived there at the time. And so we go down there to celebrate. I don't know if we went to an event that night or just went out to hang out, so many people. It was a blast. And I was just like, we keep running into people. You can tell foreigners, they always ask us questions. They can tell we're local. And I go, why don't you just start speaking in German? So she does. Happened to be 2 Germans that asked in English, and she started speaking German.
Nice.
And she was getting called out, like, where are you from over there? And I'm picking up, I'm just nodding my head. I'm just playing. I'm
Yeah.
like, I'm not even going down this road.
You bet.
They're going to call me out in a second. You're not getting an accent. I'm not pulling that one off at all.
Absolutely.
After about 5 minutes, they go, where are you from? She goes, right here in Atlanta, Georgia, just plain as day. And you're like, it was hilarious. We're like, we'll buy you a beer anyway.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's amazing. One of my favorite vacations ever was, I think it was like 1998. I did my first German vacation, and we flew into Koblenz, Germany, in the Rhine Valley, and we stayed in castles in the Rhine Valley for a few days. Ended up going to a city called Rothenburg, which is a walled city, and it's an ancient city that the locals have tons of butthurt over because in World War II, even though it had no strategic value, the Americans bombed the snots out of this ancient city and just basically flattened it.
Oh, wow.
It was bad.
Yeah.
But we ended up going to Munich, and we're there during Oktoberfest, which obviously starts in September. And one of my favorite things was I had a stein of beer that was as big as my head, and this waitress, the Kellnerin, she walks out. She had like 4 of them in each hand.
It's amazing.
I'm like, the beer weighs more than she does.
It's amazing. I literally don't know how they do that with their hands. Like, and I saw this one woman like carrying a circle of them.
Yeah.
And like you said, I mean, she's smaller than I was. I was like, what?
They need to become fighters. Anyone can have strong hands like that and be that small, pound for pound. I'm betting on them.
This is what I married a German, and I'm telling you sleep with one eye open. Because if she slips around my neck, it's over. It'll squeeze me like a chicken. It's over.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so I'm going to take a left and go back to Sandler. So tell us the story of how you got here, like your career and kind of your trajectory, because I think everybody listening's got a sense of well-read, strategic, and like your personality. But what was the pathway? Like all of those natural orientations, like, how did you get here?
Yeah, it's a good question. I've always been interested in material things. It started out material. My parents got divorced when I was 13 years old. When I was 14, I was like, I got to get out of the house. This is awful. And so I lied to get a job at a grocery store. That lasted for only a couple of weeks until they figured out, I was really, and when I was 14, it looked like I was about 9. So they figured it out real quick.
Yeah.
And then I decided, you know what? I don't want to make $2.35 an hour minimum wage. I'm going to start doing something. And so on a dot matrix printer, I printed out a bunch of flyers, and I drove my bike over to the rich side of town. And I said, look, for $50, I will clean your house. I'll vacuum, I'll dust, I'll mop, I'll scour all the bathrooms, the kitchens, the whole this, that, and whatever. And it worked. The first time I went out, 2 people said yes. And
nice.
so I was like,
yeah.
Now, I also don't like to clean. So I had a dilemma.
Yeah.
And so that's how I hired my first employee, was I dragged one of my buddies in, and I said, hey, if I give you $5 an hour, would you help me do this? And he's like, yeah. I'm like, why don't you bring your little brother? I'll give him $5 an hour. And all of a sudden we started a business. Well, that grew into something that paid my way through private high school.
No kidding.
No, I kid you not. And
So you paid your own way through high school?
Yeah.
At that point,
Yeah,
you're like, I'm done with parent, I'm going to do my own thing right now.
Yeah.
Period.
Well, and I also had a younger brother and younger sister. My parents are only about 19 years older than me.
Mm-hmm.
And so when they got divorced and I was 13, they were like 32.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And they were free for the first time in their whole lives. And so both of them were like, party.
Oh, God.
Yeah.
And so, I was all of a sudden in charge of groceries and cooking and doing laundry and all the stuff that a 13-year-old boy really never wants to do.
Right.
And I figured, you know what? I'm not going to wait for a box of Cheerios and some chopped up fruit to show up. I'm going to go make the money so I can do it. And that's what I did.
That's amazing.
And it worked out pretty good.
Yeah.
And so you started your business, paid your way through private high school.
Yep.
So what was your next step after that? Do you sell the business? What?
I sold the cleaning business because it ended up being a juggernaut.
Wow.
I ended up with something that was sellable.
Wow.
Yeah.
Sold it to a Polish couple that I had met at the second phase of my career, and that was I started dating this. I started dating this girl whose dad had a printing shop, and he was always complaining that he couldn't get reliable labor to run the various printing presses. And I said, why don't you teach me? And he said, okay. Well, I ended up running 3 of them. And at the time, he would pay me $10 an hour per machine. So I was running 3, making $30 an hour.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it was kind of cool because he would pay me time and a half at 40, double time at 50. And I was working like 60 hours a week and going to school at the same time.
Whoa.
So I was making more money than my parents combined, which is not a brag. It's just a fact
Yeah.
of what it
Yeah.
was.
Yeah.
And so I really dug that. That was the next thing. And then I went to college and continued to do that stuff, paid my way through private college.
Yeah.
0 student debt.
Yeah.
But I also didn't get to experience college at all.
Right.
Because I was working 60 hours a week and going to school full time. So it was brutal, but you look at kids these days and they're like, we got $200,000 with a student loan debt and I'm a barista making $15 an hour. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but
It's a difficult situation to be.
I have an issue with that. Not to stop you short.
No, go ahead.
One of our sons went to community college here. He was during the COVID and stuff. He's like, why would I sit in a dorm room? Blah, blah, blah. And I'm going, why don't more kids do this? I think the largest check I wrote for a whole semester was $525.
I love
a whole
it.
semester.
You
And
bet.
Full courses.
Yep.
Full
He has
load.
put so much money in his bank account
Yep, and he
has learned
works.
so much about money and life and independence.
He found a
and
great job here.
He's done a great
He's
job.
bankrolled a lot of money, saved it, and now his next 2 years will be paid for at University of Arkansas.
Awesome.
And I'm going, why don't more kids, why are they going this far into debt? I understand medical school, but when you graduate with a degree in being a doctor or something, you're going to make that money back quick.
Right.
We're talking about different degrees that is going to take years to pay off.
Yeah.
But you didn't have to go that route.
Yeah.
I know.
And I think we should be encouraging our children to get, real degrees. I just finished reading one of the books. I read a book a week on average. One of the books that I read about a month ago was Up from Slavery, which is the autobiography of Booker T. Washington. Fascinating stuff. The guy literally was born a slave, grew up a slave. Civil War ended, and he ended up working as like a 7-year-old in Pennsylvania coal mines and whatever, making nothing just to have subsistence for the family, and then ended up figuring out how to get his way to a school that a white Civil War general, Confederate Civil War general, started for the uneducated black people.
It's amazing.
And what was interesting about it was what he did was he didn't get into the soft, mushy things of, we're going to become a sociologist, which is, again, it's a science and I get it. But what he was teaching these kids and these people in this school was how to farm, how to build things, how to actual skills
that are in demand.
Actual skills. And the people who would graduate out of this stuff had like marketable skills, so they can go out into this world and earn a living. And it was awful in the South, make no bones about it. Post-antebellum Civil War was horrific. It was terrible through Jim Crow. It was awful all the way through probably post-World War II. There's no question that all of those things were awful. But if you look at how kids today, they go into these mushy, like, I'm going to go get a degree in gender studies, or I'm going to go get a degree in lesbian dance theory, or whatever it is that they decide to do. And what are you actually going to do with that besides be a professor for lesbian dance theory? I mean, seriously, you can't do anything with it except for go to Starbucks. And then you're mad because you have like a lifetime worth of student debt. It's more than your first house probably is going to cost. You're never going to get rid of it. And somehow, like my kids have all made different decisions, and you want my kids to pay for that? No. Sorry.
Well, and I think like things have gotten so complicated and confused in people's minds. You're allowed to be passionate and interested and curious about lots of things. But if they're not in demand and they don't provide service and value to someone else, you don't get paid for it, because there is no value, no monetary value in that. And that is just true.
Yeah.
It's not mean, like it's not weird. You can go study lesbian dance theory, be passionate about that. Knock yourself out. Read everything. Be the preeminent. But if nobody will pay for it, nobody will be paid for it. So you got to have something else, and like you can have a passion and a hobby and interest and a job and a skill set.
I mean, think about this.
It's
like
the ROI. It boils down to that.
Yes,
so what's your return on investment? And you have to view college that way. Now, as expensive as it is, it's they have to take that into effect. They should be teaching that in high school instead of what school you're going to go to.
I know.
Oh, that's great. You got accepted to so-and-so. They don't teach what are you going to do with that. Not usually. That's up to you.
Well, and think about this. It's high school and even college curriculum. There are a handful of schools in the entire country that teach you sales. Everything in the world is sold to you.
Yes.
The shoes, your stiletto, your high heels, giant stormtrooper boots that make you 7 inches taller. Like those were sold to you. The haircut that I got this afternoon. Everything is sold. The canopies that I chose the canopies. They were sold to you by someone.
Ideas.
Yeah.
Everything.
Through actual sales or marketing or both of them combined.
Yes.
It's one of the two.
100%.
Psychologically or physically.
Yeah. Well, and sales and marketing are actually intertwined. Dacia, you and I have talked about this a lot.
Oh my God.
I go into companies all the time, and they're the salespeople are like, marketing sucks. They didn't do anything. And I'm like, but they did bring things in, and you just didn't close them, stupid.
That's right. Exactly.
I was on the sales side for a while, and we envy, it was like marketing. What are they doing here? I'm not going to get patted on the back if they take all the credit for this. It was me who sold it.
Sales always gets the credit.
But when you look back on it, it's like what helps sell that product? Their marketing, along with the personality or whatever that helps get a product in. But the marketing sells it inevitably.
Yeah. 100%.
It's a longevity of products is marketing.
But if you think of like in the world that we live in, everything is sold, and there's never a shortage of qualified, good, effective salespeople. Never. They're always searching. I call them unicorns, the top performers, the ones that have a process and follow that process and deliver consistent results regularly. They're disciplined. They have a process at all times. And those are so few and far between that, again, if you just taught a college class, like here's sales 101, 201, 301, 401, and help, that would be a marketable skill that I would tell every kid on planet, just take that. Just take it, even if you're going to be, a doctor. Because guess what? If you're a doctor, you still have to sell your skills and your service.
Have a minor in sales and in whatever else you're passionate about and want to really focus on. The finance is another one. Like if you're going to run your business or anything, she would, mentor up at UNT, University of North Texas.
Yep.
And, some of the kids would come up afterwards and do Q&As and, and I'd talk to him, what are you going to do? I don't know. I'm freshman and sophomore. And I said, hey, I didn't know either. But I said, the one thing that I can guarantee you'll use is some type of financial education if you want it, because a lot of them are there to be entrepreneurs or whatever.
Yep.
I go, you have to know this. There's no way around it.
Yep.
I go, you can have the best idea, the best business. Until you learn cash flow, until you learn these things, it's not going to work. This is why small businesses fail.
Yeah.
It's because you don't know how to use them, operate the money that you're making.
Yeah. It was the first thing that I did when I went to college. My degree is in accounting, actually.
Oh, yeah?
I was about to ask.
Oh,
Nice. Nice.
Yeah. Like nerd.
Oh, no. I love it. Yeah.
But starting my first business when I was 14,
Yeah.
like I had to run a checkbook and I had to
Yeah.
buy supplies and I had to pay people. And with those people, I had to pay, employment tax, unemployment tax.
As a teenager.
As a
Good Lord.
14-year-old.
Yeah.
And so
It's amazing.
You had to know those types of things. And
Yes.
for me, I'd watched an uncle in law start a business in contracting, and then he was an artist. He did stuff like here with the crown molding, and he would build these beautiful things, and you're like, oh, you're the Picasso of carpentry. And he went broke. And ended up in debt to the Internal Revenue Service, and they ended up whacking his house and all this other stuff. And as I watched this as a 12-year-old, because I was working for him in the summers as a 12-year-old, I was like, I never want that to happen to me ever in my entire life. And that's why at 13, I'm like, I'm going to get an accounting degree for exactly that reason.
Well, I mean, I this is going to sound arrogant, but it's not. I mean, the reason that our firm is effective is because of exactly what both of you are talking about. Like, is founded on a backbone of entrepreneurship. So our entire team looks at everything like if this was our business.
Yep.
And we talk in the language of business. We talk financials and how that connects with marketing and what's happening. We have those conversations with clients about, is it really working? Where's the breakdown? And it was founded on the back of a person that was a salesperson for over a decade. So it's like, so I could not agree more with what you guys are saying, because it's about the language of how value moves through the world and through business. And if you can sell something and you understand how money flows, there you go.
It gets way easier, doesn't it?
Way easier. Yeah, exactly.
What were the biggest challenges that you have had to overcome as you launched the Blender organization? Tell me what that looked like for you.
Me. So what I mean by that is I am not a micromanager, which is a blessing, but there was a period of time where I just would love a person and their culture fit so much that I was not good at the accountability side, and matching the role and like what they should be doing and understanding like the metrics of that performance. And also org charts, right? So like I understood money, but not like how Kyle understands money. And so I would hire to solve a problem without backing it up, saying, okay, is this what the organization needs to thrive long term? And so I'll give you a perfect example. There was a period where I had more support staff on salary than doers. That's dangerous. And I could not see it. I couldn't see it because I hired them to solve problems that were problems for me versus, okay, wait, why are those problems actually there? Do they need a person to solve them? And like, what does the business actually need to have from a staff and a talent standpoint to drive revenue? And so it was the people piece, the people component, like how do the numbers match the people? How does the leadership style and accountability match the people? Because I can sell and I can market and I can understand money. But man, that middle part of like, where do the humans and it in my baggage and my blind spots just always land squarely on the people pleasing people side, where I really lose the forest for the trees. I mean, that was why it was so beneficial when Kyle came in, because he could respect the blessing of my tendencies, right? Like the good side of, being people oriented and people first.
Sure.
But also be able to say, and here's the facts. And now we're going to walk through those together. And we're going to make a little more structured decisions around people than you have done in the past. And our people are amazing because of it.
Yeah, it really sucked sitting on the sidelines watching this, because at that time I wasn't part of the business. So just on the weekend, sitting around, how's it going? Where are we going from here? Blah, blah, blah. And, she hired great people. She hired people who were professionals at the role they were given.
Yeah, they're amazing.
It was just too early for the business to hire that person for that role.
Yeah.
That's why I say it was me. It was not them. It was me.
And, and to be honest, she didn't want to hear that.
No,
because I would talk to her. I was like, when you break down calls per employee and what they produce, I go, this isn't going to work. I go, there's not enough work to support them. And I had to line it all out. It was, she still didn't want to believe it. She's like, but this is the person we're going to need. I go, that's too far down the road. We don't have cash to operate on until we get there.
Yep.
We got to cut ties.
Yep.
It's interesting how common I see this all the time. And you have the additional complexity of, well, you're married. So there's no hiding.
Yeah.
There's no hiding.
It's taken years to make that work.
Yeah.
We do it on purpose.
Yeah, and we still have to work at it.
Yeah.
For sure. You know.
No, I see this a lot, and the idea is that you want this infrastructure. So you bring in all these sales in, but you've got the infrastructure and the capacity to deliver. That's okay, but you have to look at your burn rate of cash and go, okay, well, I'm going to run out of cash in like 11 months, and therefore I need to, do something. And it's like an equalizer on this old 80s stereo. You've got to pump this up and dial this down, and you got to find that right mix. And unfortunately, I see this a lot of times with entrepreneurs who have a nice wad of cash to sit on, where they're like, I'll get there, but they don't.
Yeah.
And, this is part of the sales training. I'll teach people. I'm like, look, you've got to have a goal. You have to set up your goals. And I'm not talking about, I want to be rich. That's not a goal. That's
It'd be nice to have so-and-so.
Yeah.
And I know in 5 years I'll get there.
Right.
You got to line them out. You measure, you write them down, have them like a roadmap is what we call it.
Yeah. Well, and I actually just started teaching a class in our sales mastery class this morning. We do sales training, sales mastery every Wednesday from 8 to 9:30. And I asserted that if you don't have goals, you're not going anywhere. And I actually shared with the class today that in 1979, Harvard University did a survey of all of their MBA students. And they said, how many of you have written goals and an action plan to achieve those goals? And the answer came back, and 3% of them had written goals and a plan. 13% of them had unwritten goals and plans, and 84% had none of the above. Fast forward 10 years, they looked back and they realized that the 3% that had written down their goals and had an action plan earned 10 times more than the other 97% combined.
Wow.
But there's a second piece to this that I don't think a lot of people know. The 13% that had unwritten goals, but they still had goals, or made double what the 84% that had nothing, no goals at all. And so I guess the moral of the story is that if you don't have goals in whatever it is you're going to do, I don't care if it's sales or entrepreneurship or finance, if you don't know where you're going to go, you don't have a plan, and you don't track them daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, semi-annually, annually, if you don't have a 5-year plan, you're literally going to be like a rudderless ship in the middle of the ocean. You're going to get tied through, you're going to get pulled through every current, whether you like it or not, and you're reactive in your life. And for me, I will not have any of that. I want to know, I know where I want to go. I know what behaviors I have to execute to get there. And I measure myself constantly in order to do that.
Yeah. It's interesting because, so I used to set, always quantifiable goals. And what I end up finding emotionally for me is that they ended up feeling like a beat down. I would set them slightly too high, and I believe in stretch goals, but then the stretch goals were such emotional, just self-brutalization. Like, it was ridiculous, like on the inside, what I would do. And eventually I learned I needed to balance. So I still have quantified goals, don't get me wrong. I want to get some shit done. But I realized I had to have, for my personality, softer goals, like more core, like calling, core value orientation, where I could, it kind of goes back to identity, where I could say, no matter what the numbers are saying, I am confident, I am moving forward in that, and I am creating a business world and human connections that are advancing who I want to be as a person and what I believe about the world and about people at large. And so, I have them framed on my desk, and they're about our marriage, they're about the boys, they're about what I want this organization to teach the world about work and about significance inside of work, no matter what your title is. And there's quantified goals on there too. But I realized I had to find my balance. I use SMART goals. We build roadmaps. We're very disciplined around that. We do it for our clients. But then I also had to have the other stuff in order to keep me sane. It was kind of weird. So for you, how do you define goals? Is it the SMART goal? What do you mean by that?
So I think you just hit the home run of the podcast on that one because I'm a balance guy. And so literally my goal is to maximize my revenue. I'm not even going to say it because it's obnoxious, but I only want to work 35 hours a week doing it.
Nice.
And I'm not going to compromise. If it's beyond that, I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
Because for me, it's incremental costs. It's the opportunity cost for me to work that extra, say, 35 to 50 hours. How much extra money can I make? But then what the hell am I going to do with it? I'm turning 53 next week. I have a wife, the German, that I like to climb mountains with.
Yeah.
There's not at any point in my life am I going to sit there and go, on my deathbed as I'm, just got run over by a busload of cheerleaders, and that's how I'm going to die. College cheerleaders. College cheerleaders.
And do they fall out of the bus while they're running over you, or how's it work? Oh,
yes.
Okay.
Absolutely.
I think I've had that dream. I'm just joking.
False, cut it out.
You're going to have to edit that one out. Yeah. But as I'm laying on my deathbed, there's not at any point am I going to go, man, I really wish I would have closed that extra $100K of business, with that publicly traded company. I'm not. What I'm going to want is I'm going to want to do what we're doing. We're leaving next Wednesday. The Germans kidnapping me, and we're taking a direct flight to St. George, Utah. We're going to go do Angels Landing.
Oh, wow.
In Zion National Park.
Yeah.
And we're going to be there for 4 days. We're going to do a sunset ATV tour for one of the days. She rented e-bikes. So we're going to be all over the park. We're going to going to hike 100 miles in the 4 days.
Yeah.
I'm on board with that.
So in regards to my goals are in terms of mind, body, and spirit, and also business, professional, and I break them all down. So I've got a million kinds of goals. What kind of dad do I want to be? What type of Christian do I want to be? What kind of husband do I want to be? What kind of friend and family member do I want to be? I have goals for all of those. And then I have all the normal business goals. I want to make a shit pile of money.
Yeah.
And I want to go party a lot. That's basically what I want.
You're my type of guy.
I work so I can go have fun.
Yeah.
That's kind of what it is. But I don't want to just go work and do coke lines and off of strippers' butts. I want to go hang out with the German.
Yeah.
That's literally what I want to do.
Yeah, exactly.
And so, some people will say, oh, well, maybe you're not motivated. Oh, no, I'm absolutely motivated because what I want to accomplish with the German in my private life is massive stuff.
Yes.
It's just massive stuff. So the goals are humongous. And yes, you have to chunk them down, and they're all SMART goal associated. And so again, I know I'm being a little crude and rude, but in the end, yeah, my goals they're all SMART goals, but it's in 15 different areas.
Oh, that's
For
awesome.
people,
Yeah, that's perfect.
yeah, for people who don't realize and set out your personal goals, say it may be hiking 100 miles in 4 days. If they've never done that, they don't know how rewarding that is, and how long that stays with you, and how that pushes you when you get back to accomplish goals in your professional life as well.
Yes.
I've hiked like 14ers, 14,000 feet elevation in the mountains and that. And my first one happened to be during a blizzard on accident. It was like at the very end of September, early October. I can't remember exactly. And my brother-in-law at the time was like, hey, you ever hiked a 14er? We mountain bike, do all these things. And I'm like, no. What are you talking about? He goes, let's do it before the wintertime hits. It happened to get snowed on. This is a story of its own. Brutal. But it was the most one of the life-changing things I've ever done, to where I'm like, I need to set these out there. Me and my son backpack, set out like a 3-day trip hiking over 40 miles, those type of things.
Yeah.
And when you accomplish them, trail running, that type of thing with teams. I love doing that type of stuff, but you have to prepare, you have to train for them, you have to organize it, you have to go do it, you have to weather the conditions, and then you come back and you're like, once you apply that in your business, for somebody who hasn't done it, I encourage them to really go do something outside of their comfort zone. Because we enter those things in our business life all the time.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned setting your goals in business earlier, probably like 15 minutes ago. And if you don't have those goals, you'll run around chaotic and you'll make gut or emotional decisions. You can do that with a lot of cash in your pocket or broke.
Yes.
And they're both not good, because you see right now we're getting ready to launch something that we're getting ready to throw a decent amount of money at for us. It's kind of a risk, but it's a drawn-out, organized risk to us, where we go, all right, now here's the plan for this. This is a 18-month runway of X, Y's, and Z's. This is how it should roll out. This is what we're looking at and hoping for.
Mm-hmm.
If it doesn't, we know.
We'll adjust.
All right, we adjust and go from there.
Yeah.
And if you don't have money and then you're making decisions off gut reactions, that can be detrimental as well. Of course, you don't have money in general to make decisions that you can afford to lose, but those are the type of things where you're like, I'm selling now, I can't hang on, whatever. I'm like, oh, no, back up. There's ways to move stuff around. You've got 2 more months under this. What you have right now, we just got to move the money around.
Yeah, I think too many people fear failure, and I teach this all the time. I'm like, look, when I ask a room full of people, I'm like, when I say this word, I want you to say out loud the first thing that comes to mind. And I'll say failure. And everybody's like, bad, negative, terrible, awful, cry, all these negative things. And I said, it's interesting that you say that, because the way I look at failure is this. Failure is only the emotion that you assign to it. And I also said, here's the second piece. All learning only happens through failure. Like, you cannot learn something by getting it right the first time. So I know everybody knows Kim Jong-un, the dictator in North Korea. And they said on his very first try at a bowling alley, he bowled a 300.
Oh, yeah. Did you hear about his golf?
No, what do you do? 5 holes? 18 holes in one?
Yeah, it was something absurd. Shot a 40-something.
Nice.
It was like,
yeah.
What? Hold on a minute. That's not possible.
His hairdo alone disqualified him from ever being good at anything, really.
Yeah.
You can only be a dictator by having that haircut.
Yeah, right.
For sure. But think about it. No learning at all happens without failure. And so the real question that I have for people is, should you redefine failure? So for me, failure is something, it sounds obnoxious, but failure is the achievement of a goal that's different from the one you set out to achieve in the first place. Neither good nor bad. You either learn from it or you try it again in a different way. And again, I go back to the equalizers on the stereo. Maybe you have to up this a little bit and you pull that down. And I would never advocate to quit on the first try unless it's skydiving and you didn't pack your, definitely don't fail at that one on the first try, because you won't get a second. But almost, nothing in life happens instantaneously on the first try. You've got to be able to replicate it. And so Michael Jordan, didn't even make the high school basketball team until he was a junior. Thomas Edison failed at the light bulb 10,000 times before he got it, got it right. And that's kind of my point, is that I think it's John C. Maxwell wrote a book called Failing Forward. Mm-hmm. One of the greatest books I ever read in my life. And he asserts it's the same thing. I think that's where I stole it from. So Mr. Maxwell, don't yell at me for this one. Yeah. I'm giving you kudos. Yeah. But I mean, all learning happens only with failure. You don't learn squat. If you got it right on the first try, well, you're probably lucky, but what did you really learn? You never learned how to come through adversity. You never had to be persistent. You never had to think critically like, well, did I really get lucky at that and just get it right the first time? Or is there maybe a better, more efficient way of doing that? And so you only get those things through failure. And that's why I tell, in terms of IR theory and how you apply that to sales, I know I never answered that question, but you think about this. Salespeople get told no all the time, 100 times a day.
Oh, yeah.
100 times a day. So if your identity of who you are is tied into your performance as a salesperson at any given level, you're dead. It's over. It's over. But if you have your identity separated from your role as a salesperson and your identity is tacked at, say, an 8, 9, or a 10, like high, no matter what's going on, you're going to go through a slump. There's no such thing as a salesperson. Greatest salesperson in the history of the world has gone through a slump where they just suck.
Yep.
And if you say, "Oh, I suck because my sales suck," that's exactly the opposite way. You are going to like nosedive, kamikaze style, right into the ground. And so that's where that plays out, because you have to have the emotional intelligence, the IQ, to understand if you peg it to something that doesn't move, whatever that is. Everything is just a season. So you can have a bad season with your kids, with your spouse, with your friends, your family. Not everything is going to be what I call shits and giggles all the time. It's just not going to happen. It's not even reasonable. It'd kind of be boring if you didn't have some struggle in your life in some way, shape, and form. And so, again, this is why I think it's so important as a salesperson in particular, but 3x that. As a business owner, as a husband, like if your identity is tied high up, at an 8, 9, or a 10, what happens if your kids get sick, or your wife gets COVID, or whatever it is, and maybe one of those roles starts taking a nosedive? You're going to be able to be strong and consistent and focused through it, and that's important. I think that's.
Yes.
For me, it's an anchor that I can't let go, because life is a series of seasons and they come and go quickly.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, so I've just got to go back and pull this back in. So college, accounting, then take us through what job did you get after having been an entrepreneur since 14 years old and working your tail off?
You're going to laugh when I say it. So I got an accounting degree, and at the time, I graduated DePaul University in 92, I think it was. Everybody in their right mind wanted to go to work for Arthur Andersen.
Right.
And I was like, nope, don't want to go work for Arthur Andersen. I had an offer from Arthur Andersen, again, 1992. They said $36,000 a year, get an expense account. We're going to fly all over God's green earth, doing audits, financial audits all over God's green earth, all expenses paid, benefits, the whole 9 yards. And I was like, it sounds horrific to me. And so I actually found a little tech company in Lake Forest, Illinois called Blue Feather Communications. And it was a company that it was pretty cutting edge at the time. And what they did was they made animated video for HR companies instead of talking heads. So just think of if you wanted to increase the participation rate of a 401k for a Fortune 1000 company, they would either give you a manual, or they would have somebody in HR do a video and be like, this is what happens, whatever, and if you, whatever. And so what they did was they decided we're
That
going
was
to
cute, by the way.
Did
If no one's watching that, well, actually, the vocals are good enough.
I can tell you for sure who's gonna be shooting arrows at me. Like Comanches, they're gonna be coming after me everywhere. You just did a girl impression.
Yeah.
That's
Love
terrible.
Love it.
But we created these things digitally, and we actually had the voice of Tony the Tiger, no kidding, as the voiceover.
Nice.
And he would read the script and say, "Hey, welcome to the William Wrigley Company 401k. This is how it works," and they'd talk about the funds and this, that, and whatever, and they'd have the graphics come up. Well, anytime that the graphics or the plan would change, say the match went from say 2% to 3% or whatever, you wouldn't have to do anything other than send the video back to us, the hard drive. We'd put it in, put new graphics in there instead of having to reshoot a whole new video.
Yeah.
And we were able to do it in blocks and units. And from there, I got involved with that because I thought, oh, that's cool. And then I started thinking, there's not a lot of money in HR. What if we got involved with stuff like, other things, sales and other training videos, and what if we did this? And so I started creating ISO 9000 videos and total quality management, TQM, and I started expanding the library out. And while I started as the assistant bookkeeper, 3 years later, I was the chief operating officer, and I owned a third of the company because I took zero in salary for 3 years.
Wow.
I took stock.
Yeah.
And then we got bought out.
Wow.
And it worked.
No joke.
That's early. Before you're 30?
Oh, no, that was
way before.
Yeah, I know.
26.
26.
Wow.
And you're like, So how many goals did that buyout accomplish what you thought when you were 14? Not realistic goals. Not a house in London, Tokyo.
Yeah, it didn't do that. But
yeah.
I mean, I was way up the food chain in terms of achieving what my goal was. Like I set the goal and I was like, oh, okay, well, I'm way above that one.
Oh, that's awesome. Before 30. Yeah.
Yeah. But from there, that's when I started construction companies because my dad had a stroke. He had a stroke when he was 40. And he couldn't do what he was doing. And I was like, okay, he had a long recovery for that. He had a short-term memory problem. Mm-hmm. And as a result, he was only able to work as a cashier in a Shell station, a gas station in the suburbs of Chicago. And it occurred to me, I'm like, man, this guy's working the third shift. It's the overnight shift. He's going to get shot. And so I thought, why don't we start fixing houses and building houses? And that's what we got into. So then it started, the remodeling, windows, roofing, siding. I started another one in that winter, which was building custom homes. And that was because the crews couldn't work in the Chicago suburbs during the winter when it was nasty out. So if I dug the hole, put a foundation in, put the shell up, all winter long, I can have them finish the inside of the house. And then the third one that I started right around 90, that was actually 2000 was the third one, was a basement waterproofing company. And so from there, sold them, closed two of them, sold one of them. And then I just became a mercenary for about 10 years because companies would come in and be like, dude, you could sell ice to an Eskimo, teach our people how to do this. And I was like, okay. And I'd do 2-year stints and I'd take an equity piece out as part of my consulting fee. And it was 2 years because I didn't want to get tied down. I was like, 2 years in and out, turn it around, flip it, do it again, turn it around, flip it. And then finally my best friend, one of my best friends on the planet, who we've been friends with since we were 16 years old, he's like, the Sandler thing, I've been a client for 5 years, Tim. I'm like, what in God's name is Sandler? And he starts telling me this. And of course, my eyes roll in the back of my head. I'm like, this is terrible. I can't do this. And he shared it with me. And then, that's ultimately how I got hooked on it. Because I looked at it and I'm like, I could do that.
Yeah.
I could do that. That's way more systematic than what I was doing.
Yeah.
And here I am. So 7 years later.
And loving it.
Love it. Yeah.
Well, it's so interesting because, the journey is so much. And, you mentioned the personal side of that earlier, too. This journey was so much about what you could accomplish and, your individual impact and, your pathway. And now, your journey is so much about other people's pathway, and like their potential. And even, like you taking like the challenge of like who you are, and IR and, just really treat like, coming to people as whole people, not a role, a job, an outcome, a goal. Like so interesting. Like, wow.
It's fun. The fact remains this is that when you look at in corporate America, you either drive culture or culture organically happens and it's done to you.
Yes.
And so for me, I'm like, look, let's sit down with leadership and the ownership and figure out what kind of culture do you want to have here? And then we start to build teams through that and we build processes through that. You can hire to that type of thing too if you're sophisticated enough with it, which is why I use behavioral assessments because I want to see how people are hardwired.
Yeah.
When you're in an interview with someone, that's the best version of themselves. Kyle, if you're interviewing for a job with me, you're never going to go, hey, Tim, I'm going to suck at this. I'm going to disappoint you there. I'm never going to follow through. I might show up 3 days a week, and 2 of those I'll probably be hungover because I drank too much bourbon and whatever. You're never going to say that. You're going to present like it's first date. It's the best version of yourself. And people are like that in real life. So, if I interview someone and they can survive my first interview, then I will do a behavioral assessment because then I can see how they're hardwired. And the tool itself I would never disqualify someone just based on the tool itself.
Right.
What you want to do is you want to take the human experience, and then you want to look at the data and the science, and then you ask better questions in the second interview. And if even if there's a contradiction, you say somebody's score is really low on ambition and drive, and that's for a salesperson, that's the number one thing. You have to have ambition and drive because that's your motor.
Yeah.
Like what's going to make you pick that phone up 500 times this week is your ambition and drive. You get out of bed and you're like, you open up your Superman, like, and you just fly off. I need that to be super high. Well, you can say it, but I can look at it and scientifically measure it. And so if it doesn't match up in that interview, if I still like you anyway, I'll go, well, what about this? And if you can I'll give you a behavioral question where you have to work your way out of it. And if I'm convinced by it, then the process works, even though the data is different from what I'm experiencing.
I love to hear that.
Yeah.
You hear so many people not even get into an interview because of how much AI has almost filtered out the resume process and so forth.
Horrible.
Or you do take an assessment and be like, never got a call back. Like, should I fudge? You know what they're looking for in a way in some of these assessments.
Yeah.
And they say, well, I can call BS on that too.
Yeah, you bet.
But, I'm like, what about the personal side of things? If you're, especially in sales, if you're talking to humans all the time, that has to be a metric of itself outside of the data. And to combine those two are very interesting.
Yeah, it's actually what my clients love the most about. They love the sales training, and I do leadership training as well. They love that piece of it because most HR organizations don't have something quite that sophisticated. Like I've got behavioral and organizational psychologists on my team, and so when I'm looking at, I'll create my the stock interview questions in the beginning, and I'm watching body language. I'm paying attention to tonality. I'm looking at all of the variables. I'm listening to the words. I'm letting them sink in. And I want them to provide me with an experience to show me and demonstrate that they can execute for results. The science helps me do that. But once I get to that second interview, then I'm going nuclear. Then I'm bringing in, people that are 10x smarter than me. And if they can survive that thing, then I can go to my client and go, you should hire that one. And they do.
Yeah. Yeah.
So his first job, you basically just told me a while ago, you're like, oh my gosh, this is like HR. This is horrible. And now he's a professional on top of HR as it ever gets. Think about that connection. He was in a way. I know you're in sales in this, but as far as HR to the psychology, hiring, finding the right fit, the right people, how things are orchestrated, that's outside of operations. That's the key right there.
Yeah. Well, and I also stack the deck in my favor too, because those are the same clients that I do sales training for.
Nice.
So I know that they're trainable. I know how trainable. I can measure how trainable.
Yeah.
And then of course I set what we call an upfront contract with everybody. So anytime there's an offer extended by the client, the upfront contract is, here's what excellence looks like. Here's what expectations are in terms of execution of behaviors. Here are the top 10 behaviors you are expected to execute. And if you fail at them, that's okay. We want you to fail fast, but we want the ramp. We want the first two wheels, the front wheels of that 747 off the runway inside of 90 days. And then we want flight at 91 and go. And if they can't, and there's different roles. So sales is obviously different than if you're hiring a director of HR or any other role. Sales is somewhat unique, but regardless of the role, you have to have a top 10 list of behaviors for that role. I don't care if it's an executive administrator or a CFO. You got to know what that is, and you have to be able to hold them accountable. So you set the goals with them. You're super specific in what expectations are for execution for excellence. And if they don't hit the required mark, then you have to look at, okay, which part of that equalizer do I have to turn up? Is it a training thing? Is it a will thing? Or is it a skill thing? If it's skill, I can train it. If it's a will thing, I can't teach will. Nope. And for me, I'm super slow to hire, super fast to get rid of. And I don't want, when you look at, most companies have the 20-60-20 ratio. It's 20% of their employees are top performers, 60% are in the middle and variable, and then 20% are the low.
Yep.
I don't want the low 20%. C's are out. And that's how I run my business, and that's how I help my clients run theirs too.
Is that the true ratio on that?
Yep.
I always used to tell her, I was like, when I was in sales, I was like, you always see the top 25% performing. Maybe it was just what I was in. And I'm like, they carry the business. They are the innovators. They're the ones outperforming everybody, always.
Yep.
And I'm like, there's 50% just drifting, and the bottom 25, like you said, will never get better. It was almost on it. You could watch it and go, they could try anything they want, and they're just not going to be any better than that.
Yeah.
At sale, they're in the wrong profession.
Well, it sounds it might sound a little terrible, Kyle, but you have to remember, like the bottom 20% of any organization, performance-wise, they're miserable too.
Yeah.
They don't just suck at what they do.
Yeah,
they're miserable too, and so it's my job to allow them to go be happy somewhere else. That's literally how I look at it. It's not like, oh, you're messing with people's livelihoods. I'm helping them be happy somewhere else because clearly they're not happy here. Now, there's times and there's circumstances. There's never any absolutes in anything in the business world. So somebody may be going through this like horrific deal where they have a parent or a family member who's going through cancer or whatever, and they're crushed. Yeah. And so there needs to be some grace involved, of course. And some humility and judgment. You have to get the facts and the data. But what I will also submit is that most of your bottom 20% performers are just bottom 20% performers. The exception would be my wife and I are, struggling with a kid that has cancer. That's the exception, not the norm.
Yeah, totally.
Right.
So that's how I look at it. And then it's still humane, and there's still empathy involved because again, they say, oh, you can't make judgments. And I always call bullshit. I'm like, we make thousands of judgments. We judge each other every day in 10,000 different ways.
We have to. Yeah. It's how you organize the world. It's not a big deal. Yeah.
For sure. I mean, that's how we gauge ourselves.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. And we have to. And we live in this society where you can't judge me. Actually, I can. Yeah. And I should. I really should. And if I don't, it's at my own peril and the peril of my team and my family if I don't make judgments. Now, there are bad judgments, of course, if you do stuff like, blanket on skin color or religion or whatever it is. Those are not judgments anybody should be making because people are people, right? But I read a book by Thomas Sowell, and it's called Discrimination and Divisions, or, oh, goodness. But he said there's two types of discrimination. There's discrimination one, and it's discriminating based on the conversation you're having with the person in front of you. It's not based on discrimination two, which is gender, sexual preference, skin color, none of that stuff.
Prejudices.
And I was like, that's really true, because again, we've been programmed that we live in this world where, live and live, everything is permissible, even stupid stuff. And what he said, and I thought that resonated with me, is that we make discriminating judgments constantly. Yeah. And it's part of we have fight or flight instincts. It's woven into our DNA. Yeah. And I would be an idiot if I had a bunch of, Irish dudes. I'm Irish. If I had a bunch of Irish guys coming in with baseball bats and, Lucille from The Walking Dead, with the barbed wire on it and it's bleeding and this, that, and when I'm walking down the street and I don't cross the street, well, you can't be stunned that I got my brains beat in by the dude because I was an idiot. I should have been more discriminating. And so, again, it's very nuanced and it's very complex, but that's the type of stuff that I wrestle with in the real world. It's why I incessantly read about race relations. I read incessantly about different religions, and world history is so amazing because all of those things kind of come to play, and you see how it creates these biases and even belief systems that can be so completely wrong. And in the business world, I need to see through all of that stuff.
Yeah.
I need to look at the person for the person. And so, that's also why I like the behavioral assessments, because I'm like, I'm going to do an x-ray on you before I hire you to figure out if I should be asking different questions.
That's awesome.
So anyway, I know I'm on a rant, but that's how I roll.
I love it.
That's how I roll.
I love it. Love it. So if you could give people one specific encouragement or piece of advice, what would it be?
I think that I heard something in an interview there's a pop singer, her name is Halsey, and she said something that I thought was one of the most profound things. I was like, wow, especially she's young and she's this pop singer that lives in this bubble of fame and wealth and this, that, and whatever. But what she said was amazing. And her story is fantastic because she struggled with, depression and stuff like this. But what she said is, you got to realize that you're not the center of the universe.
Yeah.
Not everything is about you. Some things just are. And I was like, it was amazing. And I love her voice on top of it. Yeah. So I'm like, please sing whatever it is. Just, that was cool. Now go sing without you. So I think that's another one. And I think my final piece of advice would, pick a lane, be passionate about it. But passion isn't going to get you there. It takes tons of hard work. And I don't care if it's, hard work to build a business or to build a successful marriage. Nothing ever stays the same. If you take the snapshot of, you and Kyle on your wedding day, you're different. Now, you had a choice. You can either sit there and wax ecstatic about, oh my God, I wish it was like that because that day was so great. Or you can realize that you guys are literally like these molecular beings that are, and if you can grow together and it can be way more fun, or if you don't pay attention to it, you can fall apart. The same thing happens with your business. Like you go, oh, I'm so excited. I'm all jazzed up about, selling, sales and leadership training and business consulting and executive coaching. It's so exciting. But if you don't do the hard work behind it, it's like a house of cards. It shatters at the first breath of wind.
Yeah.
And so I guess that would be that's my philosophical.
That's great.
That was my zen.
It. Yeah.
I love it.
I'm going to go in the lotus position.
I love it.
Well, since we got married, I've gotten better with age, so.
Absolutely.
I'm good to go.
Same.
But he loves to embarrass me by saying she's my second wife. And I'm like, and then he'll go, well, I mean, she's my first wife too, but I'm like, good Lord, babe.
Hold on, let me defend myself right here. Everyone goes through changes in life. I mean, that's
100%.
No matter what.
Right.
And you grow and you get married for a reason, especially when you're young. We were only 25. Some that might not seem young, but it is young.
It's young.
And you just experience things and you don't really figure yourself out until later. and you can be on board with that person still or not.
Yep.
And it's just like, oh, wow, we figured out a way to just come back, and it's a different experience now.
Yeah.
It's like getting a divorce and getting remarried to somebody you were supposed to be with.
Yeah.
Who you're connected in a way you realize who they really are, and it's okay to be different.
Yeah.
Thank God I like this version of you.
No, it's okay to be different. Well, and so it's like having a second wife, because we understand where we're at now, and are fine with that.
Yep.
I don't know. We had this huge conversation not long ago. This is a rabbit hole about the past, present, and future. And I'm like, do you understand? We only live in the present. Like, that's present. It just ended. It just ended. It just ended. I go, so many people focus on the past. Why? The only thing we have to look forward to is the future. That's it.
Yeah.
I go, you can only learn from that. Just take a snapshot and learn from it and move on. When you get caught up in that, we were sitting there and I go, think about people who talk about the past a lot, live in the past, and I'm not talking historically. I go, 9 times out of 10, well, I couldn't even prove it was more than 9 times out of 10, that they don't have drive to succeed further in careers or anything. It's weird. And I just started bringing up random people who were one way or the other, and I'm like, you never hear this person harp about the past or how hard it was. They only talk about right now or the future. And I went, there's got to be something to that. I know it sounds simplistic.
No,
but
I think you're onto it.
It's really deep when we were talking about it the other day.
No, I completely agree.
Oh my gosh, the reason they haven't gotten any further now, and I wasn't judging them as far as thinking that person should accomplish more than what they have, but they're just stuck in that.
You could just see alignment there with focusing on what was behind them.
Yeah, versus
in their lack of progress in certain places. It's just interesting.
It's interesting when you think of the analogy of when you get in your car on your way home. I want you to think about this, because this is literally how I look at life. When you're in the car, you're staring forward. You've got 32 square feet of glass in front of you. And so you can see all the world in front of you, and you're moving through it, at whatever miles an hour. Me, I prefer 110. So I'm going 110. So I'm looking at the world in front of me. Now, there's also 32 square inches of mirror for me to see what's behind me and to reflect. And that's how I live my life too. It's okay to get some historical reference for what I've done. Like, what lessons have I learned, and the failures and the massive, the massive train wrecks in my life that I don't want to replicate. And so I can go, and when you're in driver's ed, they tell you, at least this is what they told me, when you're driving, every 15 seconds, just take a glance in the mirror to see what's going on behind you. And that's true. And it's a glance. Yeah. Most people sit and they look at the freaking mirror, and that's all they look at. And the problem is that you've got an 8-foot wide circumference oak in front of you, and you're missing it because you're too busy looking in the past. Yeah. And so Dr. Tasha Eurich wrote a book called Insight. I think it's one of the coolest books I've read, because it's talking about how self-awareness is a skill that you can learn. It's a discipline. And what she said was, we tend to ruminate and wallow in that past. And so for me, I just won't look at the rearview mirror. Like, I've learned some amazing lessons.
Well, you said you reflect.
Yes.
That's a perfect word for what you actually do. You don't look and stare. Those are the ones that are sitting at the red light who you have to honk their horn at because they won't move.
Right.
Yeah.
It's 100%. The same concept.
Yeah, I love that.
Yep.
Totally. All right. Any final questions before we let him tell everybody where they can find him?
No, it's been great.
I know. This has been really so fun.
How long have we been doing this?
A minute?
Hour and a half.
That's awesome. Oh, wow. I love it.
I know.
No, it's good. I know, and it flies.
It's fine. Like, we don't know what will ever happen with this. We're just getting going and figuring it out, but we're having fun doing it. Meeting great people that I normally, I don't know when I've heard about you for years now.
Yeah.
And we got to sit for an hour and a half talk, not eat anything.
Deep
We
end,
weren't
baby.
drinking beers somewhere at this moment, maybe
Yeah.
later. We'll see what happens. But, it's different conversations, I was talking to three of my best friends. There's four of us that kind of hang out. And I'm like, we need to like meet outside of barbecuing or outside of a pool party or whatever and have a conversation. And they're like, yeah, we do.
Yes.
Like once a week, just something. Throw
big deal.
thoughts off each other. It's
gotta be intentional, though.
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
It has to be intentional. It's like for the German and I, we plan date night. We plan it. And we make it happen because life is busy. Like she's working like crazy. I'm only working 35 hours a week. So Kyle, I'm gonna give this to you just so you can use this because you're a handsome dude. So I am the trophy husband. Just so you know. So that's why I only want to work 30 because I'm the trophy husband. The trophy husband doesn't work.
He is trying to be
First, you're discrediting yourself a ton because of how much you're reading that you apply to your work. You're not counting those hours.
No.
Yeah, good point.
There's more work. It's just you enjoy doing it. That's part of
It's
your
awesome.
life.
It fills you up.
Yeah.
Yep.
That's amazing.
No, that's the other pieces. Keep up the good work. Keep doing this stuff. You never know where this is going to go. Just based on what I know about Dacia, she's a world beater, and this is gonna work. So continue to do that. If you ever need help or want me on this again, maybe people are going to be like, that guy, you never put him on there again. He made fun of HR department. They didn't.
Don't worry, we have stuff coming that we will share with you.
Yeah.
Okay, so where can people find you though?
I'm not really on social media. On LinkedIn, you can look under Timothy J. Barry. I think I'm the real Tim Barry.
Barry.
The real Tim Barry, Barry. Or maybe it's Tim Barry, Executive Coach. My website is tjbarry.sandler.com. And so those are that's the easiest way to get a hold of me. So
Perfect. And we'll put all of those in the show notes and such like that.
Wonderful.
So thank you again.
Yeah.
This was
Thanks a lot.
so fun.
this was ridiculous. This is the first time I've ever done this. I love you guys. I will do this anytime you want. This is
love it.
ridiculous. Thank you so much for having me.
Awesome.
Thanks for coming.
Onward and upward.
Amen.
Adios.
If you enjoyed this episode of the Corporate Caffeine Podcast, please help us help you by subscribing. I also hope you'll find us on social media. You can follow me, Dacia Coffee, and my company, The Marketing Blender, by searching us on your favorite platform or checking out the show notes for the links. We bring this to you because we envision a business world full of meaning, connection, and prosperity for us all. Until next time, onward and upward.